everyone. Welcome to Empowering Exceptional Minds, the podcast diving into neurodiversity through real conversations with parents, individuals, and professionals on challenges, strengths, and unique experiences. I'm your host, Maayan Glazer-Koren, an educational therapist, ADHD educator, and ASD specialist. At Educational Therapy LLC, my private practice, we support kids and adults with executive function and learning differences toward confidence and independence. This podcast is a collaboration with Wiz Therapy, connecting individuals to providers and streamlining services for neurodiverse communities. Our goal is to share strategies, stories, and insights to empower families, educators, and professionals. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast or Wiz Therapy. The conversations here are for information and empowerment, not a substitute for professional or medical advice. And most importantly, if you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please dial 911 immediately, or you can text 741-741 to reach the crisis text line in the US for support. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm genuinely excited. I know I'm gonna swallow my words in between. I'm starstruck also a little bit because we have with us someone whose work has shaped so much of what we know about learning, reading, and dyslexia across the lifespan. Dr. Sandman-Hurley is not only a leading expert, but also someone who brings together research, clinical practice, and personal experience in a way very few people can. And like I told you before we jumped on this recording, is that I've read your books, and I wish we had hours, truly hours, to talk about all of your books. And I will put a link to them in the podcast description. And I did interview many clinicians and educators, but I have never spoken with someone who understands dyslexia so deeply at every stage of life, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, while also bringing lens of your own advocacy for your child. And that combination of research and lived experience is rare and very powerful. I think your book about advocacy for dyslexia, I have to say personally, because I sit in IEPs and 504s and helping to advocate for my clients was very difficult, because I was really hoping that your words will show me, okay, this is what we can do. This is what we can do with the educational, system and the structure and everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you've been through very similar experiences that I've been through. So first, I just want to say that I was really looking forward to talk with you today, and I'm a fan. And for our listeners, you are in for something very, very special. So thank you.
Thank you. That was a really, really nice introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
You're so humble and modest. Yeah, people read her books, okay? She knows what she's doing.
Thank you.
So I would love if you could begin by telling our listeners in just a few sentences about your personal and professional journey. What led you into the world of dyslexia, and why has this work become such a cornerstone of your life?
So I love talking about how I got into this, because I started as an intern at Read San Diego, which is the adult literacy program of the San Diego Public Library. So I was working there as an intern while I was getting my master's degree in education, and I was getting my teaching credential. But while I was there, I realized that this was so fascinating to me. And so I became a full-time employee. And while I was a full-time employee there, I was able to go to the IDA conference that was here in San Diego. And so it was right around when Sally Shavitz wrote her first book, maybe just a little bit before anybody even knew really who she was. At least I didn't. And so I was listening to her, and I thought to myself, oh my God, that's what I want to do. I've been working with these adults for so long, no one's really been able to explain why they're having so much trouble reading. And then she just, pretty much explained it. And so that led me down the path of wanting to get my PhD, or I got my doctorate, actually my EDD, in literacy with a specialization in dyslexia. So she was the reason that I really got interested in it. And then once I got there, it just, that's where I wanted to be. The adults, I stayed at the adult literacy program for 12 years. I always tell a story about Linford, who was the very first student I did an assessment on. He cried during the assessment, and he like is the reason he is kind of like a, he's kind of like the reason he's what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say moniker, but he's the reason he's kind of all the adults rolled into one. And so, when I think of why I do what I do, I think of Linford, but Linford is really a representation of all the adults that I met during my time. And you said a few sentences, but I've gone way over a few sentences. But I realized after I met Linford and met all these adults that, I really wanted to help kids before they became the adults. So after I got my doctorate, I started DTI because I really wanted to help. We started off with just training teachers because we really wanted to get the training into the classroom so that they didn't end up with the literacy program telling me their really sad stories about how low literacy had impacted their life. So that's how I got where I am today. And then it just exploded. It exploded from there. We started with training, and then we did tutoring, and then we did advocacy, and then our training has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and your work with advocacy is really big too.
The advocacy is a big piece. It is, and it's just it's fascinating to me. It's heartbreaking and frustrating, and it's just so wrong, but it feels good to try to help in that way.
There is also a lot of, I feel like when I talk with parents, there is so much guilt. Like, how come I didn't see it? How I didn't know? Why didn't say anything? Why did the teacher didn't say anything? Um, and I mean, we cannot fix the world, but it definitely starts with the education system. And even today, we're sitting here, it's 2025, we're almost in 2026, and we still don't have enough training and information for, general education classroom teachers about dyslexia. Let's not talk about middle school when you have a teacher that they're doing their own work, but if it's a very experienced teacher, then they maybe have some experience. But when you're getting your teaching credentials, you don't have nothing about, or maybe a class about learning differences and how to work with kids with learning differences. Maybe it really depends maybe on the university or college, but that you're getting your credentials from, but there isn't enough training. And I would say that in a perfect world, we will have, this is how we're going to teach reading.
Yes. And I would actually say it's not just the teaching credential programs, it's also the master's in teaching. When I was getting my doctorate, there was nothing about dyslexia, and I actually got a lot of pushback from my professors wanting, because all I wanted to do was talk about dyslexia, and they were just like, no, 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 we don't do that here. And so I really had to, push my way through that. And then, the masters in education, we had like maybe one night about all learning disabilities, and that was it. So it's all throughout the education system. But I think it's important what you said at the end is it really depends on where you're going. So my experience with higher education for myself has been all in California, and it's not here, definitely not here, but I haven't investigated all the universities. Um, I just know that in our dyslexia certificate program, we have it's like 95% educators, and almost half of them will make some kind of comment along during the process of the training that how come I didn't learn this in my training? They always say that. How come I didn't learn this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that question. And we always say DTI shouldn't exist. Organizations like mine shouldn't exist because what we do should be done in a pre-service program, but it's not.
You can
So
say the
here we
same
are.
about our professions, right?
Yes.
It's interesting you said that because another colleague of mine also mentioned she is a first grade teacher, and she actually also didn't have any training with this. She's younger than me. I think she's in her 30s. And again, it's like the same thing that you say. And for her, she had to take extra classes for literacy because she
Yes.
was to emphasize on literacy in her classroom. Um, and on another way, in another like place, one of my colleague who is a retired special ed teacher told me that when they worked with with students in the classroom through an IEP, they were not Orton Gillingham trained. So it's also, I just want to throw it out there to our listeners to do your homework and ask what, especially if you know if your child is dyslexic and will need remediation from the school, is to ask what kind of curriculum is being taught. And also when you don't know if your child is lexical or not, and you are going to, school, you're starting school, ask about the curriculum because you have to understand that it's about marketing money and buying curriculums.
Very much so. Yes.
So we want it to be scientifically based of how to learn, the English language. Um, so I would love it if you can also explain in what. So for parents who are hearing this word for the first time, dyslexia,
Mm-hmm.
who have only heard myths or misconceptions. Oh, it's like they don't know how to read, they read slow. What is dyslexia?
Okay, that's a good question. So I used to be able to recite the definition, but they just changed it. So there's a brand new definition that came out in the end of October of this year. But basically, it's a neurological condition that makes it difficult to decode and it makes it difficult to read quickly enough or have enough fluency in order to get comprehension at the same time you're decoding. It impacts spelling. You can have difficulty with spelling, but be a decent reader and still have dyslexia. So it's kind of that unexpected difficulty with literacy. So Sally Shaywitz in her first book, I'm not sure if she does it in her second edition, talks about it as an impairment in a sea of strengths, a weakness in a sea of strengths. So you're really good. Your child is, seems to be moving along just fine. And then all of a sudden they're trying to read and spell and it's not happening, or it's not happening at the same rate that all of the other things are happening. So that's what dyslexia is. If they're having trouble getting the words off the page, decoding words, reading fluently, spelling, getting comprehension. Sometimes kids with dyslexia might be able to read something, but then they can't tell you what they read. So, that you have to, just make sure you're parsing out all of those things. Not everybody with dyslexia looks the same. So if your neighbor's kid has dyslexia, it's not going to look the same as you. And if what worked for them isn't, might not be the same thing that works for your kid. So, be very wary of all of that as well, because they all look completely different. The new definition, thankfully, also now includes the continuum. So they talk about the continuum of dyslexia from mild, moderate, severe to profound, which we've been talking about for years, but now it's officially in the definition. It can impact your social and emotional health, which is something I talked a lot about in my in my book, The Adult Side of Dyslexia, because I do come from the adult world. And so I've seen it. So I think that's far beyond your question, but I just want to make sure that when you said earlier too, is that parents feel a lot of guilt. So like, why didn't I see this? If you see any of those things, please bring it up. Don't be scared to be that parent. Don't. It's not just going to go away. You might realize that that's something that you experienced in school too, but maybe it looks different for you. And it could be the same thing. Just make sure that if you see anything that doesn't seem right, to bring it up. And if somebody says it's okay, they're just going to outgrow it, that's a red flag statement. Don't, your kid, trust your gut. And any of us who are parents, we know when something's wrong with our kid. And you can't just let people just tell you to keep waiting, because the worst thing you can do for a kid with dyslexia is wait.
Yeah, this is, I feel like a kick in my gut right now because I'm thinking about three of my previous clients for a few years ago, and they were, well, it was during COVID, and there was no assessment. I remember I assessed them in my backyard with academic assessment, and I told the parents I think they need to get a neuro evaluation. Both are ADHD and dyslexic. dysgraphic as well. And one of the things that, because of the pandemic, they couldn't get the assessments
Oh,
done.
yeah.
So we have to keep that also in mind. So it was a little bit later. They only got assessed through the school in fifth grade, and I worked with them when they were in the third grade. And I kept working with them until they went to seventh grade. But what I wanted to say about that is that one of them was through the school was not flagged with orthographic processing. Um, and that will be really good if you can also talk about this and why sometimes there is a misdiagnosis with that, because most of my clients that I work with, this is my personal experience, were misdiagnosed with, they were not diagnosed with orthographic processing. I'm like, ew. So we need to get a reevaluation for that.
So that's really interesting because what happens is a lot of people think of dyslexia even in the dyslexia community, and they think of it as a phonological processing problem. So, if the student does well on a phonological processing test, then they just say, oh, it can't be dyslexia. But that's not really the case. You have to dig a little deeper. So even these screenings that we have all over the country, that's great. It's a wonderful first step, but the screening doesn't really catch what the orthographic processing issues or any orthographic processing issues that might come up later. So you can be dyslexic and have average to above average phonological processing and be deficient in orthographic processing. So what that means is that you are able to verbally manipulate the language, or even sometimes when you are adding letters, you can manipulate the language, which means you can take a sound off, put a sound on, change the word. You can do all of that verbally in your native language. But you might not be able to take all that information and get the words off the page. Or you might not be able to remember a sight word from lesson to lesson, or a word that quote unquote doesn't follow the rules. Um, and then the spelling as well. So you can have orthographic dyslexia and not have phonological processing problems. So that's really important. These kids tend to get identified later, which is not good for them. It's not good for them instructional wise, and it's not good for them mental health wise.
Yeah. I love talking about this client. I mean, most of my clients, I'm sure we can say that the same. Like they just like leaving like this space in your heart. They have such
Oh
an
yeah.
imprint in your heart. And I remember that I had a 16 years old, and mom reached out because of dysgraphia, and he is also ADHD and was never assessed as dyslexic. And when he was in 11th grade, it was early of the 12th grade, I said, you got to get him reassessed. And because I believe there is something with the orthographic processing, because I noticed that they are very good friends with ADHD and dysgraphia. And just letting you know, Kelly's doing like yes with her
Oh,
head.
sorry. Yes.
Uh, and he has orthographic processing dyslexia, what we call stealth dyslexia, right? There's
Yes. Yes.
so many names out there. Surface
There are.
dyslexia, stealth dyslexia. It's so
I like
confusing.
twice exceptional.
He's definitely twice
Yeah.
exceptional, although he said I'm stupid most of the time. And I
Yes.
kid you not, we get his reevaluation and I'm saying,
And he's
dude,
not.
you're definitely not
Yeah.
stupid.
That's the internalization of it. That's the weighting. That's what weighting does. Because they
Yeah.
know they're smart, and they just sit in a classroom day after day after day, and their peers are getting it and they're not getting it. And so they start to internalize this as, oh, well, if this kid next to me who's clearly not as smart as me is understanding this, and it's got to be me.
Yeah. And the best thing about this guy is that he said, okay, what are we doing now? It's like, okay, so and then we started structure wording for you, and I'm gonna ask you to talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
And he was doing great, and he graduated high school. He's doing great right now.
That's
He's
awesome.
in the Marines. So
Oh, good for him.
oh,
And
yeah.
I'm glad you've brought up a couple times middle school and high school. And I'm glad that you are bringing that up because I just feel like I'm getting a lot more emails and a lot more
Yes.
calls about expert testimony and just providing, basic information about middle school and high school. And I think it's really important that we remember that just because someone gets to middle school doesn't mean they no longer have dyslexia,
Right.
or doesn't mean they no longer need their IEP, or if they get to 11th, 12th grade doesn't mean they no longer need their IEP. The issue is that what's provided at middle school and high school isn't usually great for kids with dyslexia. So, as a parent and advocate, you really have to work through that to make sure that the IEP is has what they actually need. But I think it's really important that we start really focusing on educating middle school and high school teachers. And even if it's just awareness that this is what dyslexia is, because I can't expect a history teacher to all of a sudden be a reading specialist. But I think we need to really focus our awareness there, because I think there's a serious lack of awareness there. And I just listened to an IEP a couple weeks ago where they were just trying to take him off the IEP basically just because he's in 10th grade. That's really the only reason I could hear on this recording. And I understand they don't have the resources. Like, I think we're setting the school up for failure because we're not even providing them the training and the resources. So, I mean, the whole meeting is set up for failure, quite honestly. But I just think, like I said, we just need to really maybe put a little bit more attention on awareness for the people involved in the education of those kids.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah. Those
I'm
poor
with you on
kids, and
that.
they're so frustrated and
Yeah.
anxious, and it's not okay.
There is a lot of school trauma because of that.
Yeah, a lot. I mean,
Um,
being a teenager is hard enough, you know,
Especially
especially with
nowadays.
technology. My son is
Yeah.
16, and I'm like, I am so glad I didn't have that stuff when I was 16. And I'm so glad I didn't know what everybody was doing on the weekend and I wasn't invited. I'm glad I didn't know, you know,
Yeah, I get
hard.
it. Same. Yeah, we just had the phone
Yes. Like
connected to
attached to the
wall.
wall. Yeah, I
And
did.
having our
Yeah.
parents like,
Yeah.
get off the
Answer it.
line.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny.
It is funny. Yeah, it's interesting. We live in such a really kind of fast-paced world, and they are exposed to so many things. And you will hear me talking a lot about middle school and high school because this is the age group that I work with personally.
Okay, good.
Um, and I do feel like it's like you said, there is this lack, but I also feel like even with the elementary school, you have an IEP. Okay, you're diagnosed with dyslexia. Okay, you're getting your minutes. Is this enough? Right? So sometimes you have to understand, to our listeners, to our parents, that the minutes might not be enough.
Well, what's happening during those minutes? I need to know exactly what's happening during those minutes.
Right.
Yes, I want to know who's in there. Usually in middle school, high school, it's just study time. It's usually just like 15 kids in a room, and there's one teacher who goes around and makes sure they're doing their classwork.
And also with elementary school, they are in groups.
Yes,
So you have different levels. It's not one-on-one.
right.
And yeah, so I always tell parents you might need to get a dyslexia specialist after school if
And
you
we'll
can
start off with
afford
an
that.
observation. Like, try to have someone go in there, observe someone who is like a third party, maybe an
Mhm.
advocate, and have them observe the group and make sure and just decide if that's even an appropriate placement or not. I've done that and walked out with, tally marks of how many minutes they actually had with the teacher. And it was like 7 out of the whole 30
Ooh.
minutes because the poor teacher, this isn't, any kind of attack on teachers, but the poor
Mm-mm.
teacher's got 6 kids and there's 30 minutes. And that, that's about right. It's about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And they all had different needs, they weren't all, in there for the same thing.
And our reading resource specialist or the special ed teacher um, depends on the training of what they get. And they're also burned out.
Yeah,
Let's face it. They have many kids on their caseload
absolutely.
and they are burned out. Can you talk a little bit about remediation? What is multisensory remediations for our listeners? And because I want to, I want us to kind of be more. I mean, you and I can talk about terminology and all this kind of stuff, but it's really important that parents will know what to ask.
Yeah, so multisensory is just part of it. And there is there are arguments out there that there isn't tons of research supporting the multisensory part, but just, I think most people who have done this agree that having them involved in it in a multisensory way actually does help, whether or not it's been parsed out in the research or not. But what the multisensory part about it is, it's the visual, auditory, and tactile kinesthetic. So when you're working with someone, make sure that they have they're manipulating things. So it could be manipulating grapheme phoneme cards or syllable cards. Or with one of my students, I used to just give him he liked the whiteboard, so I would give him colored dry erase markers, and he would write. We actually were using structured word inquiry, so he would write morphemes in one and prefixes and suffixes in another, and that really helped him to see the different parts of the word. So just getting them involved. But the multisensory is just one part of it, of the structured explicit cumulative program that students with dyslexia need. Is that the part you want me to explain?
Yes.
Okay, so there's two different ways. So that's under the umbrella of structured literacy. So under structured literacy, in my world, there are two ways to go about it. So you can go about it using an Orton-Gillingham approach, which is what most people refer to as structured literacy. And Orton-Gillingham is an approach, it's not a program. So there are lots of programs like ours that teach our own version of Orton-Gillingham. They're all pretty much the same. We all just add our own little flavor to it. And then what that does is teaches the student how to read a word based on the syllable type, or how to spell a word based on spelling rules. And then they use a sight word study method to memorize rules that quote unquote don't follow the rules. And so what you do is you start off with the closed syllable, which is the easiest syllable, or the most common maybe. And then they start with that syllable, and then they master that syllable until they move on to the next syllable type, which is an open syllable type. And then they start getting to more and more complex words. It's very explicit, it's very direct, it's very multisensory. Anybody who does any sort of Orton-Gillingham approach should have gone through a training that includes a practicum. So it doesn't mean that you go to a 3-day workshop and called yourself certified. I've been asked to do trainings at school districts for like 3 days, and then I feel like they're just checking a box saying, look, they were exposed to it. And I'm okay with planting a seed, but I'm very careful to say, hey, you're not certified. This was an introduction to Orton-Gillingham. You do need to go through a practicum and have a real student and have a coach and somebody that mentors you through that and gives you coaching, because we all need coaching. We all need someone to tell us, what we're doing. It's not supposed to be easy. So the people who have finished it should have said, this is hard. And now you know that they're good at it. Because if they were able to get through something hard, then they're good at it. It should include progress monitoring. So any kind of structured literacy program should have progress monitoring. You should be getting progress from your school no less than 4 times a year, maybe more. And then under the umbrella of that is also structured word inquiry, which is something that was coined by Pete Bowers. And he wrote the book, How the Written Word Works. I think that's the title of it. And so what that is that is looking at the language not as an intersection of morphology, etymology, and phonology. And so it's based on the fact that English is morphophonemic, which means, and so I also have a master's degree in linguistics. So if I get like wordy, just let me know, with terms that most people don't want to hear.
People, if you don't like talking about morphology, you're listening now to 2 morphology buffs, nerds.
Yeah.
So just kidding.
This
Keep
is where
listening.
I really nerd out. My family's like, stop talking about words, Mom. I'm like, okay, sorry.
I can relate to that.
So annoying. And so what morphophonemic means is that, you cannot know how to pronounce a word until you know how it appears as at the end of adding everything onto it. I'm not explaining that as well as I usually do. But for an example, the word please. So you have the word please. If I add on the suffix ure, I have changed the phonology of that word from please to pleasure, just by adding a new morpheme. That's what morphophonemic means. It means that based on the way that the structure of the word will impact how you pronounce a word. And so I actually just uploaded onto YouTube for free a workshop that I did called Dyslexia and Spelling, where I talk about the phonological rule. And so you can go and look at the phonological rule that comes from linguistics. It comes from phonology and linguistics, and I used it to explain how words are pronounced or spelled or put together within the context of structured word inquiry. But that I want to make sure everyone understands, because a lot of people who see structured word inquiry say, oh my God, where's the phonology? You can't do this, blah, blah, blah. No, the phonology is there. It's just not the first thing we look at. So everything has equal importance. It's just not the first step. It's the third step or the fourth step. And so it doesn't mean that just because it's down there in the third or fourth step means it's not important. It just means we have to look at these other parts of the word before we can get there. So I think people really misunderstand it if they just kind of take a cursory look at it and just say, "Oh, I'm not even going to look at this because it's not Orton Gillingham." You really need to take a look at what they're saying and then decide what you think. But I also don't really advocate to try to combine them. I think they're two different approaches, and that's
Yeah, I
important too.
agree. Yeah, I agree. Um, and again, for parents, do your diligent and ask. It's okay to ask what is the curriculum that is used for intervention? What program are you using? Is it Orton Gillingham based or structured word inquiry? Although I have to say, I didn't see structured word inquiry in my area in
No,
schools, and I think it's not as common
it's not.
as we do have Wilson reading system around here.
Yes.
Um, and other programs. I'm not, you know, I'm going to promote any of them because I don't know all of them. And I'm not going to promote anything.
Yeah.
Uh, I just wanted to say that. Um, you mentioned something interesting, and this is just my question about structured word inquiry is that when you see kids that are, oh, okay, so let me break this question down. So many kids um, that are confusing B and D, P and Q. Why do they do that? And how
So
can we help them?
So that's a fun that's a very very common question because when you ask people what they think of when they think of
I know.
dyslexia, which is something I always do before I speak to a group, they all say it's switching letters.
Yep.
It's not. So because we are born with spatial orientation. So if I show you a picture of an elephant and I turn the picture around, it's still an elephant. If I show it to you upside down, it's still an elephant. So our brain is like, that's an elephant no matter which way you show it to me. But now I'm going to give you the grapheme B and I'm going to tell you it has a phoneme B with it. And now I'm going to switch it in space and it's completely changed its identity. And I'm going to switch it in space one more time and it has a whole new identity, a whole new grapheme phoneme relationship. So most kids, not most, many kids will struggle with this, all kids,
Right.
until about the beginning of first grade, some
Hmm.
of the end of first grade. Those with dyslexia might struggle with that concept longer. And it's not because they're seeing it backwards. They're not seeing a P as a D. Things aren't floating off the page. Nothing, none of that is happening. What's happening is that they're seeing the grapheme, and it's taking them a while to figure out which phoneme goes with that and which grapheme that is. And so they're just kind of guessing which one it is in space. It's the same shape. It's the same letter. So they're just trying to figure it out and they can't do it fast enough. So after second grade, it is one red flag for dyslexia, but not all people with dyslexia have it. And it's really not that big of a deal.
That's true.
So I don't, when I was working with kids, I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I wouldn't write a goal for it. I wouldn't spend much time in intervention with it. I would teach them the bed trick when they can, put their fists together and make a bed and decide whether or not it's B or D, and then they can put it upside down and decide whether or not it's a P or Q. But that's about it. And I don't think it's worth the hassle of spending any time on it. Yeah, it can be embarrassing, and yes, it might make reading something a little bit harder, but it's not. Again, it only occurs in like in my experience, it's been like less than half of my students.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to put it out there to
Yeah.
clarify
I'm
that.
glad you did because I don't that's one thing that it still blows me away when I ask this question and that's what everyone still says. I'm like, "Really? We've been talking about this for years." It's not what it is, but
Like
here
the
we
little bunny and the duck. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's and just give them little things that they can do under the desk that nobody can see, so no one sees them doing it. It's fine. You just move on with your life.
Yes, I agree. Okay. Spelling.
Yes.
Spelling is really important. You and
Yes.
I know it. And um and yes, I do hear from parents, yeah, but there's a spell check, there's autocorrect, there's AI. Um, so why does spelling instruction matter?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm going to go back to my adult literacy roots, and I will tell you that I asked 50 adults all the same questions. And one of the questions I asked them was, does spelling matter? Do you wish you were a better speller? Without hesitation, 90% of them said yes. 10% don't care, and that's about right. There are some people with dyslexia who will read out loud in front of everybody and not care, and there are some people who would rather run out of the room screaming than read out loud. So, again, it goes back to not everyone with dyslexia looks the same, presents the same. But spelling, it matters for a couple of reasons, and the first one is it can cause a lot of embarrassment. AI is not going to catch everything, although AI is a little bit better than spell check. But spell check's not going to catch everything. There are times when you have to write things when you don't have technology, which now that I'm saying that might not be true because we all have our phones in our hands. But I have a lot of adults have said, I've been at a professional development meeting and they have asked me to come up to the front and write something on the board. Or you have to write a grocery list, or you have to do something where you have to write something. It still causes them embarrassment. You can still make a mistake in an email. You can still make a mistake in a memo. Most adults say that they have somebody in your life that they trust who reads everything for them before they send anything out. The other reason that spelling matters is because, if you can spell a word, you can read it. But if you can read a word, doesn't mean you can spell it. And I don't want to take credit for that statement. I heard that somewhere else, but it's true because you can't turn it around. So teaching spelling is really teaching somebody how the English language works. So please don't just think that they're going to learn how to spell. Don't think it's not embarrassing to them. Don't think that, it's just, I know as an advocate, I've also been hearing lately that they're not even teaching spelling anymore. So why even have a goal? And, what you're saying there is it's okay to be half literate. So, okay, it's okay for them not to know how to spell, but then you all know how to spell and you're making a decision for the student that they don't need to know how to spell, but you actually don't know what it's like. So, it's just, there's so many reasons that spelling is
Yeah.
important. Those are just a few.
And, filling up a form. Not all forms are online.
Right, right. My son and I just had to fill out a workers work permit yesterday. He had to
Hmm.
fill it out. It wasn't fillable online. He had to fill it out. So yeah, it matters.
Of course, yes. And it's really important to the underlying reading in the brain, right? It's really part
Yes,
of the wiring that we
yes.
have there.
And understanding how English works, if you know how to spell something, then you are really paying attention to that word. And if you know what the rule is, or you know why there's two L's in the word and why there's two S's in the word, then that means that you're understanding the English language, and that's going to help you.
Can we be nerds again for a second?
Oh, I'm always a nerd.
I mean, you know what really blew my mind when
What?
I was like learning all this stuff is that um the schwa.
Yeah. Oh, I love the schwa.
So I get it because I have that in my own language. In Hebrew, it comes from Hebrew. It's an unstressed sound.
Right.
We call it the lazy sound.
Does it mean
And
nothing in Hebrew? Doesn't that what the schwa means?
um, kinda, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure it has like a specific, maybe I'm wrong. I'm sorry, you guys. But uh yeah, it's like it does nothing
Yeah.
most of the time. And we even we even call it the resting the resting one.
Oh, I like that.
Um,
Visually, that looks good. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just resting there. Um, and what's really interesting is that I never knew it exists in English, and until I did the Orton Gillingham training, and so I'm wondering because I'm thinking about I have also two kids, and they are one is in end of middle school, one is the end of elementary school, and they I don't think they never learned that.
No, they don't. And even there are even some Orton Gillingham approach uh, trainings where they don't really teach the schwa that well. So I went full on into the schwa. There's also, if you're interested, I put up a free workshop about what the schwa is on YouTube as well. And so because I didn't feel when I first started doing this, I didn't feel comfortable with the schwa. And when I realized how important it was, especially for spelling, to understand why a word was spelled the way, even though we were pronouncing it a different way. It was really, and that was all, a lot of it was because of the schwa, like the word kitten. Why isn't it just Kittn? Why is that E there? And that all has to do with the syllabic consonant and schwa and all of this kind of stuff. So, if you don't understand the schwa, then you really can't teach spelling that well. So it is incredibly important to understand what it is. And you should start doing it in elementary school. You should start doing it in kindergarten. And you can start teaching it with words like banana
Yeah, that's what
or
came
even,
to my mind.
yeah. Or, I was looking up the most common first names a couple years ago, and it was like Ella, Ava, Anna. And I'm like, they all have schwas on the end, all of them. So you can even start with, names if you want to really talk to them about, this is an A, but this is how we say it. This is just another way we can pronounce A. But I really want people to know that it's not just a short U. That's not what schwa is. The schwa can make all different kinds. They can make many different sounds or no
Mm.
sound at all.
There's such an annoying little thing.
It is, I love it. I think it's fascinating. And I love it when people who don't speak English as their native language are when they pronounce something, I'm like, oh yeah, they just pronounce the whole syllable because they don't understand the schwa because they didn't have the schwa in their own language. So they might say something like family instead of family. I'm like, oh yeah, that's usually like a second language or third language speaker thing. Although
Oh
some people
my,
on the East Coast say family.
I'm gonna be so freaking aware right now how I pronounce words.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's like, oh, the word about, it's not about, right? It's
About right? About like a
about.
Canadian. Yeah,
Do they have a schwa there? Just kidding.
they do.
They do, they do. So it really depends where you're from,
Yes.
also. And
Yes, very much
it
so.
can it can also be very confusing. Um, okay, we're done talking about schwas,
Okay.
but it's really interesting.
Yes.
I'm really fascinated with the
Yes,
English
me too.
language. Um, because I feel like when I, work with students about English, um, great. Now I said about and now it's in my brain. Is
And now
that
you said it perfectly.
so then I'm like, okay, so where English comes from, right? And they don't really understand that it's such English is a new language if you're thinking about
Hmm.
the history of the language. And this is what I love about structured wording creator. It really gets into the history and the story.
Yes.
And so it's beyond just, oh, spelling boring, right? It's actually more interesting to look at English this way.
Well, etymology. So the etymology
Yeah.
of a word is fascinating. It just depends on the student. Some students it's overwhelming if you go too far into it, and some students just need all of it, and there's everything in between. But you can really explain, you know, when a word is pronounced, how to pronounce the ch based on the etymology of a word. Go down that rabbit hole with the student is really fun.
Yeah, and this is a great way to teach CH, like the
Hmm.
different sounds of CH.
Yes.
And say, oh my gosh, yes, when it says k, it comes from Greek, like echo or
Yeah.
school. Why do you say
Yeah.
school? Why don't you say stool?
Right, right. I know. And then you can talk, and then you can start listing it. Have a list of all the words that you come across, and then which category they go in of how they're pronounced, and then where are they from. You start, and then you'll see a pattern, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, there's a pattern. This is my research. Now I have a pattern. Now I have evidence, and now I can tell you why."
I love it. This is so
Yeah.
great. This is really teaching curiosity,
Yes.
which is learning.
And backing up what you say.
Yeah, but this is
Yes.
what learning is all about. It's
Yes.
about curiosity and backing it
Yes.
up.
Yes. And
So I love it.
finding patterns, noticing things, just that
Yeah.
not just like introducing one word and then moving on, just saying, oh, how does that relate to what I already know? That looks like it might follow the same pattern or not, and how do I know?
And just for our parents to understand that our brain is looking for patterns.
Right.
So this is actually works for our advantage when we are working with students,
Yes,
is to
for
teach
sure.
them the patterns.
Yes, and
Right.
kids who are struggling with dyslexia are really looking for they're really looking for meaning, and they're really looking for some kind of sense. They're just like, this doesn't make any sense. So when they start to see that sense, it helps as well.
Yeah, that's what my student said. The one that I told you about before the
Yeah.
call is that he was like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. They need to see that. They're tired of this is just crazy. English is crazy. They're tired of that. That's not working for them. They need to know why.
Yeah, and we don't need to say it also. We don't need to say that English is crazy.
So I always go on a rant about what the message we send when we say that. And I'm guilty. I've said it before, and not recently, but I've said it early on in my career. When you are sitting with a student who's struggling and you're like, you know what, English is just crazy. The message you're sending is, I don't get it either. So why even my teacher doesn't get it either. So why should I even
Why
try?
bother? Yeah.
Why bother? She doesn't get it. So let's just move on. So the words we say in little moments really matter, and we have to be careful what we're saying.
Yeah. As a French speaker, I can tell you that French is more crazy.
Oh yeah, no, I've tried to learn French for a couple trips, and I'm just like I have my phone. And it is so hard. It is so hard.
It's a very
I
difficult.
get mixed. Because I'm a Spanish is so much easier for me, and so I end up speaking Spanish instead of French by accident. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, it's funny that you said it. I was like a teaching assistant at the university when I did my grad school, and this is when my English was not as good as it today, and I was mixing so much French in my English that the students that I was TAing for were cracking up.
Oh,
There were
yeah.
so many things I mispronounced that, this word exists in English. Why do you say that like this? Why do you say it like it's in French? Like person and person,
Oh
like stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah. I kind of like
Yeah.
that. I think that keeps them on their toes.
Yes, yes. I'm like, well, what did I say?
Yeah.
You can correct me. All right. Um, what parents can do at each stage. So you again, because your amazing background and we have early childhood, we have elementary, we have middle school, high school, and of course, for adults in the workplace. What makes the biggest difference?
So in early childhood, before elementary school, it's just a lot of exposure to books, reading to them, having them follow along while you're reading, lots of vocabulary, lots of verbal vocabulary. People used to make fun of me because I would talk to my son at like Trader Joe's. I would just say, "That's an orange, that's an apple. What is that?" Constant, just constant talking about words and vocabulary and pointing things out. Oral language will be really important as they go into learning how to read. Keeping that up in elementary school, making sure that there's lots of exposure to books. I worked for the public library for 12 years. So I'm a huge fan of the public library. Go to the public library, just exposure to books. I've probably said that 3 times. Lots of, wordplay, lots of rhyming. Make sure that if you start to see red flags that you speak up really, really soon. Don't take no for an answer. Like I said at the very beginning, you know your child better than anybody. Just make sure that if you know that your student has the capacity to learn in other areas, but for some reason this is the area they're not struggling in, you have proof that they can learn. So you now know that they're not getting what they need in order to learn. So an example might be if they're really good at listening to a book and they can tell you everything you said, that's evidence that they can learn and they have good vocabulary, but they're not able to get it off the page themselves. That's a huge red flag. Go to your school and ask for an evaluation or get private services. There's no wrong way to go about it. You can either go through the school or you can do it on your own, whichever way you want to do it. Don't like I said earlier, just because someone goes to middle school or high school does not mean they've grown out of their dyslexia. Make sure you especially keep their accommodations. Give them accommodations really, really soon, really, really early as you see red flags, and that could be as early as kindergarten. They can start listening to books is really important so that they are getting that the good books, the good vocabulary, the good syntax, the good storytelling. Because if you have a child who's is behind in reading, sometimes they get relegated to books that aren't quite as well written as other books. So you want to make sure they still have the exposure to good books. And then especially middle school and high school, the accommodations are huge, huge. Most of my middle school and high schoolers kind of are just sick of tutoring. And so they just beg not to have tutoring. And if they do that, then we make them promise they'll use their accommodations. And if they use their accommodations, they're usually okay as long as the school. I mean, that's a whole different, it's a whole different conversation. But you have to just stay on top of it. Just stay on top of it and don't let anybody tell you no or that they'll grow out of it. You don't grow out of dyslexia. You just don't. It's not boys being boys. It's not because they haven't found a book they don't like yet. It's none of that. So I think that covers a lot of it.
You mentioned a few things. One is
Okay.
accommodation for
Yeah.
middle school and high school. So
Yes.
that'll be really great to hear what your experience with that. And the second thing is that the second question that I have for you, and I am very involved in many Facebook groups about dyslexia. It's really a passion that I have to kind of help parents. Um, and one of the things that I see a lot in these groups is that my kid hates reading, or they will only choose books that are graphic novels. And I'm like, okay, so they can read
That's
that.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let them read graphic novels if this is
Yeah.
what they
I
like.
mean, think about it. If you're dyslexic and reading is hard, of course you're not going to enjoy it. But that's a generalization. Some kids do, even if it's hard. But it's hard. It's like it's hard. Things that are hard aren't usually super enjoyable. And so if they want to pick a graphic novel, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I know they go to school and they have to read certain books, but I'm assuming they're talking about reading for fun.
Yeah, reading for fun.
Yeah,
Hey, I
I
have
that's great.
Romeo and Juliet and Helmet here in my office, and they are graphic novels.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine.
I don't want to read Shakespeare like that. I want to see the pictures too.
Yeah, fine. Let's write a story about the picture. But then there's the other part, the accommodations. So do you just mean examples of accommodations?
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
So middle school and high school, you definitely are going to have all of your books and your textbooks on audio.
Yeah.
You want to get really good at speech to text. So I speech to text is a good one for all students, but it really doesn't kick in until like middle school or high school. It's kind of hard to use. A lot of my adults love Grammarly. Some people hate it, some people love it. And we'll go back to the books on audio really quick. There's Bookshare and there's Learning Ally. I'm sure there are others out there. A lot of people like Learning Ally because it's a human voice.
Yeah.
And then also you want to, if as they get older, they can have note takers in the classroom. I know now that the teachers will put PowerPoints and all of that on the school on their class website before class. But if they don't, make sure that somehow the student can get the presentation ahead of time so they can just focus on the presentation instead of having to try to take notes. Recording classes. I get a lot of pushback on that one because of privacy concerns, but you should be able to record a class, especially in college. Keyboarding as well. But all of this is very student by student, case by case.
Yeah.
I've had a student who would probably type slower than he would write. So,
Yes.
it just depends. That's why you should get an assistive technology evaluation. So if your student has a 504 or an IEP, they are also able to get an AT evaluation, and that will tell you what will work for your student.
This is super duper important because parents don't know that.
Yeah,
And
I know.
I was just in a 504 meeting before Thanksgiving break, and I was advocating for my client to get an assistive technology kind of evaluation to see what works for them. And I'm having another one coming up this Monday, and I'm going to do the same because my student needs it
Yeah.
because they are in high school, and for the college, for parents who have dyslexic kids, ADHD kids in college, go to the DRC, bring the 504, the DRC or the Disability Center at your college. And many of them have membership with different assistive technology. The only thing, my 2 cents about Grammarly is that you have to be really careful because some schools are not going to let you use it because of they have now implemented AI.
Oh,
So
okay.
you have to be careful because some schools are like, no, we cannot use stuff with
Yes.
AI. Just check with what is your school allow you to do. I love Grammarly too, but then I saw the AI. I'm like, oh, you cannot use it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, very important assistive technology. Also, so what can so you work with adults, so I'm interested also to hear from you. What can adults do at work? I mean, how can they support themselves?
I want to say one thing about the AI really quick before I talk about the adults
Sure.
is I noticed that in high school now, because of the AI, they are having to write entire essays during class. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not using AI. And I think when it comes to a kid with dyslexia, that's going to be really hard. So we'll definitely need maybe extra time, or maybe they can go to a different room and have an extra time, or they can have speech to text, depending on what they're grading. If they're just grading on ideas, then they could use speech to text. If they're grading on spelling, then obviously they'll have to write it. But we are going to start to see a little bit more of that, because I know, um, just from my own experience with my son, is that he's writing whole essays within the class time, something that he normally would have done at home. But now they're not allowing that because they're worried that they're using AI. So, something to think about as well for our kids who really struggle. And I don't like that, because sometimes I have to stare at my computer for a solid hour before I can even write the first sentence. And so I don't think you get enough time to think during class, but I understand AI, I get it. We're all just trying to figure it out. But just something to think about. And then for adults at work, that's tricky. It's really tricky, because some adults don't want anybody to know,
Yeah.
and they will go to great lengths to hide it. They will just find one person they trust. It's usually a spouse or a partner or a friend or somebody at work, maybe one other person at work, and then they won't tell anybody else, and that person will help them. Or they'll tell everybody. But there's also a risk of, you if you don't have an official diagnosis, you really aren't protected. And so, you can make mistakes and get fired for things that might be caused by your dyslexia. Um, I'm going to give myself away a little bit. I watched a little bit too much of reality TV. And I was watching this one reality show where this person was clearly dyslexic, and they were rapid firing directions at this person, and he was just like a deer in the headlights. And I was thinking to myself, oh, they're having a serious processing problem. But nobody on this show, I don't even want to give it away because I don't want you guys to know what I watch. But they didn't really get it, and they fired him. And I was watching the whole thing, and then he comes on. He was talking about how he hated school. I'm like, oh, ding, ding, ding. You can see it. So if you don't have accommodations because you don't have the protection from an evaluation, then you do risk things like that happening. So, really try to use, if you can use AI at work, I'm sure that's great. Just make sure that somebody else reads it first, because AI is not perfect. If you can talk to your boss about it and ask for accommodations, you should be able to ask for reasonable accommodations. But it's really tricky for adults. There's not a lot out there. There's not a lot of resources for adults with dyslexia. There's not a lot of support groups. There's not a lot of places to go for help. I worked at the library. What our program at the San Diego Public Library doesn't exist everywhere. Um, excuse me. It does exist everywhere in California, but I don't know outside of California. So it probably wasn't a very good answer, but there's not a lot for adults out there to protect them.
The thing that I can say also is that many technology like Zoom, for example, that what we are using right now, you can use transcripts and stuff like that. So that can be helpful, or note
Yes.
taking to do that for you. It's very different if you are maybe a doctor or in a law firm. You really need to check what you can use. Yeah, you mentioned that it's really interesting because these are very similar accommodations that we use also for ADHD, with and also with dysgraphia, right? And again, it's very rare that dyslexia is by itself.
Yes.
There is a lot of like
Executive function.
yeah,
Yeah.
co-occurring, because this is my brother, this is my specialty is working memory, and it's really interesting that sometimes you see, oh, the working memory score is actually average on the assessment, but then there is a slow processing speed. So when we're talking about slow processing speed to our parents or educators, this is about the production, how long it takes to the brain to process the information that is given verbally or visually, and how long does it take to produce if it's in writing or talking. Um, so this is something that it's important for parents to understand the
It is.
differences.
What you said was really important, is that it rarely occurs by itself. So, it occurs with dyslexia, dysgraphia, executive function, ADHD, and sometimes speech. And
Mm-hmm.
OT. Oh, well, OT is a dysgraphia. OT is not a disability, the dysgraphia. So just don't, just if you're a parent, just make sure that you know that you might be seeing a lot of different things happening. Um, and some might be mild and some might be severe and it might be a combination.
Yeah, I mean, I had kids that I work with that had speech therapy, occupational therapy services, and they saw me for remediation. So just
Yeah.
letting you know this can happen. Um, okay, I'm like kind of bumped because we're like running low on time, and I'm like, whoa. So before we wrap up, and I wish we had again the whole afternoon. What are the top takeaways you want parents and educators, or even students, that listen to this podcast to walk away with? What do you want them to remember long after this episode ends?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say to remember that dyslexia is real. Um, it's not your fault. It's nobody's fault. It needs to be something that it's there are interventions for dyslexia. Don't take no for an answer. Don't wait. Don't be afraid to be that parent. Don't be afraid to be that student. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Um, just get as much information as you can. When you go out there and you Google dyslexia, make sure you're going to reputable places. There are some crazy things out there about dyslexia. So try to find the reputable places and really do a deep dive. Educate yourself. If you're a parent, just educate yourself. Before you go into any school meeting, just educate yourself as much as you possibly can, or don't go alone or find an advocate. Um,
Absolutely.
and just
And it,
don't go alone. Really, just
yeah,
don't go alone. I'll say that one again. And really get some advice from somebody.
this is so, so important because we say that too. If you can have one of us, if it's me, if I'm working with a client or, um, somebody in my team, I say, don't go alone because we know the terminology and
Yes.
we know the law, not like advocates, but we do know.
Hmm.
Um, and we always say, get an advocate I mean, people, it's worth your money.
Yes.
Don't be cheap about that. Before we say goodbye, I just want to mention your books. One of them is Dyslexia Advocate, How to Advocate for a Child with Dyslexia Within the Public Education System. Amazing book. I learned so
Thank
much from
you.
it. And it's very written in a very kind of friendly, simple way. I loved your like you bring like anecdotes from your experience working with clients and what to ask. And there is so much information there. Parents, please, 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 if you are a parent of a child with dyslexia or dyslexic child, I don't know how you would like to address that. Um, get this book. I just even shared that
Thank
in
you.
a Facebook group recently. It's also on my website. Another one is which is one of my favorite, is Dyslexia and Spelling,
Thank you.
making sense of it all. It was really mind-blowing book. Very kind of, again, friendly, easy read. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for using friendly language. And this is actually a recent one that I really enjoyed reading. And honestly, after there are different podcasts out there, like a story told, like about different things about dyslexia in adults. So the next one is dyslexia, the adult side of dyslexia, which is fantastic because we really don't hear a lot about it. And
It's
it was
true.
really interesting. Your research was
Oh, thank you.
so interesting. Really resonated with me. And there are so many words there that I was like, really loved. But one thing that I encourage everybody who listens to this podcast is that ask, and you said it in your book, so I'm going to quote you, although I don't have the book in my face. Um, ask about the dyslexic individual about their experience with dyslexia.
Yes. Yes. Please let
That
them
is
tell their
so strong.
story. Yes. A lot of if you ask an adult, I asked all the adults the same question, is describe your dyslexia. And they all looked at me like, what are you talking about? No one's ever asked me that before. I'm like, describe it to me. And I'll just try to make it as brief as possible. But what they gave me was an experience. When they described it as an experience and something they had to live through. When I asked teachers to describe dyslexia, they give me a definition. So I think it's really important that we understand that we're actually speaking two different languages. We're approaching it from a clinical place, and they're approaching it from a seriously emotional, traumatic place. So we have to meet somewhere in the middle.
It's also related to what you said about responsibility of the education system, because I read it in your book about, you said that, oh, if you're a doctor and you're making a mistake, you're going to get, an
Yeah.
ethical issue. And if you're a lawyer and you're making a mistake, it's an issue. If you are a psychologist, you're making a mistake. What about the education system?
Yeah. There's making mistakes every day. And we're setting them up. We're setting them up because we're not preparing them. Teachers are not prepared for IEP meetings. Those are serious conflict management situations that they're not equipped to handle for the most part.
And with that frustrating comment,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining
Thank you for having me.
joining today. I know it's going to help so many
Oh,
parents and educators.
I hope so. I appreciate it. Thank you.